In this lesson, we're going to start looking at data structures and ways to store multiple values in a single object in order to make our programs more efficient by collecting data into one place. So I've already started a program here, and take a look at it. And let's say I'm trying to track grades in a class. With what we know now about programming, the only way I know to do that is to store each grade in its own individual variable. And that's not too big of a deal if I'm only talking about a few grades, but let's say I'm trying to keep track of a class of 30 or 50. Then it becomes very cumbersome to have to store each of those grades in its own individual variable. A better solution is to create something called an array. So let's take a look at how that works. An array is a variable, just like a regular variable, but we store multiple values in it. The way we create an array is we start out with the data type, followed by open close brackets. Now I'm going to show you two ways to create arrays, so we'll go with the open close bracket way first, followed by the name of the array. Now in this particular example, I'm going to actually assign values at the beginning. So to do that, I have the assignment operator followed by an open curly brace, and then I just assign values. I'm just writing numbers in here. When I'm finished, I close off with a closing curly brace and then a semicolon. Another way to create an array is to actually tell the array how many elements are going to be in that array, like that. So we put a value inside the open and closed square bracket. And that means I want to store 10 integer values in the array numbers. The example above, the compiler determines that I'm going to store 5 values in the array grades. Working again with the numbers array, to actually store a number in the array, I use what's called subscript notation to say that I want to put the value 1 in the 0 position of the array numbers. Arrays always begin with the position 0. So the first element of an array is always what we call the 0th element of the array. And then I continue on from there to add more values, and so on and so forth. I won't continue after this. You get the idea of how I'm storing values. If I want to access a value, I again use array notation or subscript notation to access the values. So you see what I've done here is I've said this value sum, or the variable sum, is assigned the value that's stored in grade sub 0 plus the value that's stored at grade sub 1 plus the value that's stored at grade sub 2 plus the value that's stored at grade sub 3 plus the value that's stored at grade sub 4. And that works fine, but there's an even better idea here. Since we're just using subscript notation with values that are obviously just incrementing by 1, we could write this as a loop. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to write a for loop with my loop control variable I starting out at 0, and then I'm going to do, use a special feature of arrays. Arrays are objects just like other things in Java, so we can call methods from those objects. And a very convenient method with the array object is length, and that will tell me how many elements are in the array. So I want I to go from 0 to 4. That's the last element of grades. So if I say as my condition I less than numbers.length, I is going to stop at 4 and not get all the way to 5, which is the length of the grades array. And then in my summing statement, I can just simply say sum is equal to sum plus grade sub I. And so for each value of I, 0 through 4, it's going to access that value and store it in sum. Then I can close that off. And then just to verify that something happened, we'll write out the sum. So let's go ahead and compile this program. Whoops, we left off a value here. Let's do this again. Like that. Let's try again to compile. There we go. So let me go back very quickly and show you something. I kind of got my languages mixed up here. If you're not going to initialize the array as we did in grades, then you have to initialize it like we just did by saying int open close bracket numbers is equal to new int 10. And that lets the compiler know to reserve space for 10 integers in the array numbers. So this time we compiled without any errors, so we're going to run this program. Oops. Let's try that again. Oh, look at that. We went out of bounds at 21. So let's take a look at our program. Again, I don't try to hide errors from anybody. I used the wrong variable. There we go. Let's compile again. Let's close. That was just a little user error right there, nothing else. So there's our sum is 384. If we wanted to compute the average from that, we could do something like this. So let's see what we get. We'll compile. And then we'll run. And the average was 38. Oops, and once again, get a little sloppy here. Let's do that again. That average didn't seem correct. Yeah, 76, that's much better. So let's wrap up this lesson with a quick review. Whoops. An array is a way to store multiple values in the same object. To create an array, we use the syntax I'm showing in these two examples, the first two here with grades and numbers. We use subscript notation to access values to either assign data into an array or to pull data out of an array. And then we can use the convenient for loop with, again, subscript notation to access the elements of an array. And again, the reason we use arrays is that it's much more convenient to store multiple values under a single object than to have separate objects or variables for each value that we're trying to work with. And with that, we've wrapped up this lesson on arrays.